Hello, everyone. Good to see you again. This is our fourth class going through the rather busy integrated development environment. But by now, you're getting familiar with the layout. So we're on the right side. We discussed properties in the last video, and I made a couple of changes to the initial automation we did, but I didn't actually run them. So I'm going to quickly run those so you see the effect of what we did. To do that, I come to this blue play button here, and I could just, press it, debug. So it, as usual, it will take some time to consider, did you make any errors in the coding, which I don't think we did, and then it will run. Now, the first thing we say here, if you're watching this sequence in the middle, is that delay for 5 seconds, and then print a message box. So if you remember, we changed the caption to my message, and we said close the message box after 3 seconds. That's what we said last video. So when I pressed play, that's exactly what happened. It waited about 5 seconds before launching this message box. And you see it's right here, okay? And then it closes after 3 seconds, just like we said. So we could alter other things like, okay, what does the button say? Is it okay, cancel, yes, no, cancel? But we don't need to do that. Like we said, we're just showing you the functionality, your ability to change the properties of any given activity is what we're trying to show you now. So we're going to move on very quickly to Data Manager. Again, I'm going to scoot this over to the side. So you see that this tab here is called Data Manager. And just like the name implies, it manages your data. There are different kinds of data. We talked a little bit about variables in the last video, I'm sorry. The variables they're basically containers where you store bits of data you might need to use in your automation. Those bits of data can change, and so you have to, if it's something you're going to keep reusing, you have to keep them in a container that you can access anytime. And I created one variable called my name, which is Yinka. So another way to create a variable would be to come to the Data Manager window, which we have, this panel, and then click the plus button. I kind of like this way. And then you put a name there. You would say, I'm sorry. So here we are. It's called variable 1. This is interesting. So you just edit it. And I might say last name, right? Since I said my name, first one, I might call this one last name, right? And here you will find that there are many types of variables. The kind we used here is a string variable. My name is Yinka, but it could be a number, which would be int 32. It could be a string. It could be an object. It could be Boolean, which is true or false. And there's a host of other types of variables that it could be, to be honest. And it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But I would say very commonly used ones are strings, integers, and Boolean variables. But if I click on this browse for types, you will find out that there are literally thousands of options, right? Depending on what you're trying to do. Each of these has like a sub-item that has many, many types of variables inside, right? So again, you don't need to know more than you need to know, but you do need to know that these options exist, right? And they're basically hundreds, maybe thousands of options here. But you don't need to know all of them, like I said, unless you have any need for them. At this stage, you will be using the basic kind until you get familiar with more advanced cases, okay? So again, we've defined a name for it, what we did here, and then we said it's a string variable. Again, we could change that to any of these, but we're using string for now to keep it simple. And then you could define a default value. For example, my own last name is Daramola. I put that here. You put your own last name there. And you have defined a variable. So you can just minimize this. And you'll see that now you have two variables. My name, which we created in the last video, and the one we just did right now. So I'm going to interrupt this and go to the bottom left corner of the the designer panel. That's the center panel. And you see something called variables here. If you click on that, this pops up and you can see right here that you have two variables. The last name we just created is very much here with the initiating variable that we created, which is my last name. If you notice, the one we created in the last video does not have an initial value. In some cases, like we just did, you'll be required to put like an initial value because it just can't be empty, right? In this case, it doesn't matter, but I'm just showing you that sometimes you can define the initial value by using an assign value to just create a variable. And I just showed you another way to create a new variable, right? So you can create as many as you want, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, okay? So that's variables for you. They're basically containers for data items of different types. Arguments are they're like cousins to variables. But the difference is that you use arguments to transfer bits of data between workflows. So I'll give you an example. What we just did here, I'm going to rename this by right-clicking the center, the designer panel. I'll say my first automation. That's what we did, right? So I'll give this a name. And then I can use this little arrow here at the corner of the box, the right-hand corner of the box, to just make it tiny, right? So everything inside here, we just checked out at the beginning of this class. It delays for 5 seconds, and then it prints, yippee, this is my first automation. So that's, in a sense, one sequence or workflow, right? You could create another one. First of all, I'm going to click to save this one, to save changes. Then I could say, you know what, I want another sequence. And I might call this my second automation, right? And I'm going to create it. So what happens now is I create another one. So you see, you have one here that's main, and you have another one that's my second automation. So two different, and then you can now define, what do I want this to do, you know? And that would be, just a moment, that will be something different, right? Something very different. So I could say, for example, I want to do something with the browser. Use application of browser is what you use. That's the activity you use for that. And I could drag that in here, right? And this gives you, it basically is asking you, what do you want to automate? So what you do in such an instance is, I have this thing here that I want to automate. I want to do something like enter data into the screen, which you will have access to practice, right? So what you do is you take what are you even trying to like automate, right? You take that, well, actually this way, you just click on this indicate application to automate, right? You click that, and then it kind of like is asking, okay, touch whatever you want me to automate. Now try and make sure that this browser is the only one open on your computer, just for simplicity's sake. All right. So you just click anywhere on it, and it understands that, okay, this is what we want to automate, right? And this is relevant for later in the automation. I'm going to delete this right now. And if you notice, we were about to go into arguments, and resources are empty right now. But if I do the same thing, use application browser, drag it in, and indicate that this place, you will notice that there's something under resources now, right? So resources refer to things that are used, are shared, like this is an application we're trying to access across the automation. So that will be a resource, and it just automatically logs it under there. It could be a shared folder. There are many scenarios, but in this case, it's a browser that we're going to use very frequently in our automation exercise. So the thing about arguments, though, is that if I want to move variables between this place and this place, this first automation and this second automation, these two tabs, I cannot use like anything I defined here, such as my name. The variables here are my name and last name. They will only work within this automation. This is my first automation. But there are situations where I might need to use these two automations together, and we will probably work through such a situation right now. If I want to use anything from this first automation in this second automation, then it cannot be a variable. It has to be an argument. So it basically passes data between one automation and another, or allows multiple workflows or automations to share common data. And in such an instance, even though it's a variable, but because it has the attribute or characteristic of being used by multiple workflows, then you have to define it as an argument in such an instance. So the thing about argument is that very similarly, you create them like, you might say, I don't know, I think phone number. This form that we're looking at here has something called a phone number on it, and it has email, right? So I might say new argument is phone number. Don't put spaces there. And then I'm saying you have to define the direction. It's coming into the, is it coming into the workflow or out, or both? In this case, I could say it's an in out. You know, again, we're just hypothesizing here. You will know what to do when the case comes. In this case, it's coming into the automation, into this, like if you look at this screen here, what I want, what the purpose of this screen is that you're supposed to enter a name, a last name, a first name, a last name, a phone number, and an email address. Check this and submit. That's actually an automation you're going to have to build right now to kind of process what we're trying to explain. So what I am doing now is creating somewhere where we'll store all the phone numbers we're entering into that application. And it's an argument of sorts, because what I'm going to try and do is move it from, like, I'm going to create it like here and use it between both variables, both automations, I'm sorry. So that's how you create an argument. You create as many as you want. Remember I said there was another one, I think that was email. And then you say it's a string type variable, and I want to call it like an in out, an in out direction, right? So it's going inside the automation. I may want to use it for other things. That's why I said in out. And yeah, I'm not going to put any default value because only in arguments have those. So those are examples of how you create arguments. We haven't actually used it to do anything, right? We're just creating it. What are constants? Constants are things that don't change throughout the automation. While they are not commonly used, but you can define them by just clicking on this and say, okay, maybe a date or a department, you can give it a name. It's not relevant now, but similarly, you create one there. Resources, we have already seen an example of that by using this activity called use application browser, right? Entities, very advanced use cases, use them for UiPath data manager. Bulk pieces of, large pieces of data for processing. It's a very advanced use case. I don't really want to bother you with that at this point. After entities, you have processes. Now, these processes, assets, queues, they are orchestrator assets. If you remember from your theoretical class, I told you that there are three aspects to UiPath. The ecosystem is consistent of the orchestrator, the studio where we're in, and the actual robots who run it, right? These three, processes, assets, and queues, are found in the orchestrator. And if you're logged into yours, let's just take a trip to the orchestrator. And you can do that by just doing cloud.uipath.com, HTTPS. And if you're logged in, you'll find yourself in there. So you click on the second icon to the left, which is the orchestrator. And that will take you to your orchestrator dashboard, right? Which has, again, number of functionalities which you can access. How did they work using my video series, UiPath Orchestrator. We're not going to talk about that right now. But what I am going to talk about is that in my case, yours will be blank. I've defined some queues. Work queues are, let me see. Work queues are things that other people, like, where do you, if you have like a list of maybe 100 items that you need to work, transactions that you need to work in a day, this is where you store them so that your robot comes to pick them one at a time. And then if you look at the home button here, it gives you kind of like a summary of what's going on. So queues are for that. Again, we're not going to talk about those details. You have that here. That's where you get this from. So what you see here, in my case, you would see a list of the queues that I have created. You will have none, but I just showed you that as an example. In the future, we'll build those. Processes are any of the, you build your processes in this environment where we're in the UiPath Studio. Then you use this button right here, publish, right? To publish it to Orchestrator, whatever you built. And when you do that, it's going to land here. It's going to land in these processes. So if I decided to publish this one, well, since I finished this one, let me just, this main, I'm going to go back to this main. I'm going to hit publish. And then my first process, I can make notes like, I'm so excited. This is a first. And then, you make notes for your project, and then you click next. Depending on where you want to put it in, it's in your personal workspace, it's in the tenants. These are like folders where you can choose where you're going to publish your process, which you built in Studio in, and then you just hit publish. So it takes a few seconds and boom, it's there. So when you publish the Orchestrator, it will give you this message, and if you kind of refresh, chances are that you'll see that this is now there. Okay, so the Orchestrator itself is for when not only you, like everything you build on this computer, only you can use it. But when you publish it to Orchestrator, other people can use that process on their own computers without having to build anything, right? So everything that has those attributes would be in the Orchestrator, things that you need, that other developers or the company as a whole can use as a resource would be there. But you built it here and published it to Orchestrator. So that's what processes are, queues. A lot of these are advanced use cases. Namespaces refer to, unless you're like really advanced, you're not going to need these things. But I hope, talking about all of this has given you a sense of what's in Data Manager. It just stores some key items you'll use in the process of automation, such as your variables, your arguments, your constants, your resources. And these three they relate to the Orchestrator. And these entities, connections, namespaces they're very advanced use cases. You may not need to know what they are at this point, and we'll get through them at some point in the training. But I hope you've had a good sense of what's inside the Data Manager. We'll come back later and actually use this for something. But like I said, I want my videos to be shorter. So I'll see you in the next class. Thank you for watching. Bye.